Right, so first of all, I'll start with a sketch. So I have my palette. I've got a little plate with some acrylic paints. I'm using acrylics called System 3, nice big tubs. I quite often paint on a plate or some sort of palette I can easily wash. So I'm going to have a thin synthetic brush. Let me admit another person here. I'm going to dilute my paint with some water. I'm going to use some ochre first, a bit of white, and small amount of violet. Okay, let me just admit another person here. So I'm going to dilute it quite, make it quite runny, and I'm going to sketch my my drawing with a brush on the board. So I'm going to look for where my horizon is going to be, how much sky I'm going to have, and where my main road is going to be. And then I'm going to shape up the clouds. So let's get started here. So I'll drop this one down. So my horizon is going to be reasonably low, and I'll sketch it out so it goes a tiny bit higher up. It's actually a lovely location in West Yorkshire. That's where I live. Towards the Peak District, a little village called Penistone. I've got these gorgeous open views, big windmills, and I go cycling there a lot. So quite often I'll have a camera next to me or a little sketchbook. So I'll try to catch the views. Okay, so that might be my road leading in. That might be some of the banks next to the road. This will show me my perspective really quick and easy. Maybe part of my road is going to have a wall there, so that's going to be a nice big shadow. So it's reasonably simple composition here. Right, so that's what I've forgotten. I'm going to mute you all, so we're not going to have any extra distractions on sounds. Why is it not doing it? Okay. But feel free to ask a question, and just press the microphone button if you want to ask a question at any time. Right, I'm going to put a couple of small trees there, a bit small on the photograph, but I'm going to enlarge them just to show a bit more of a horizon, a bit more of a scale. And there might be a little gate somewhere here as well. Again, it's quite small, but my main focus is going to stay, I think maybe just a little bit lower here. I'm going to stay on the clouds. I'm going to start with a really, really big one, the one right at the front. So I'm going to have a nice big fluffy end to it somewhere here. Now, in perspectives, our clouds will work very similarly as any other shapes we might be drawing. So if we have this huge cloud, which is almost hanging over our heads, yeah, it's quite low. So it takes quite a lot of space, almost coming to the halfway through to my picture. Actually, maybe I'll just even make it further down to give it extra weight. Gently divide it into maybe something lighter, darker for me for later on. So then the rest of the clouds, I'm just going to top up my paint here, going to start being smaller and smaller the closer they are to the horizon. So I've got one here, which is probably going to be a most kind of probably the medium size one. I'll try to keep the closer the cloud to the horizon, the flatter the ends going to be. So because it's we could almost see the kind of the flatness of them. So what I'm going to do next, because the cloud's going to get smaller and smaller, I'm just going to identify those lines, those flat bottom parts of the clouds, just roughly first, so I know how many of them I'm going to involve. Okay, there's another one somewhere here. Okay, and especially the ones far, far, far away, they're going to have very small kind of volume, so they mainly might even stay as lines. And these ones could just gently come up here, and we're going to have quite a lot of space there as well. Okay, and that one's going to come up. All the rest is going to be in a shadow. So I usually sketch with my brush. It just gives me an easy option. If I wanted to move my lines, I can very easily just by dipping a kitchen towel in the water, I can just remove something here and repaint. If it's drying, because acrylic tends to dry very quickly. Actually, that cloud was absolutely fine. I just wanted to show you how I can do it. Yeah, so like if the acrylic is drying, so I can always paint with a darker color over and then start working with a lighter tone again. So that's very versatile kind of technique. Right, this area looks a little bit empty. I think I might just add another tiny little bit of a tiny hint of a cloud. So my composition is finished. I've done my major workout of planning. So it's simple and hopefully will stay effective. Right, so I'm going to wash my brush and move to a larger brush now. So this is a hog brush, quite a large one, so you can see it in the size of my thumb, so it's a bit bigger than my thumb here. Size is not often quite easy to explain because different manufacturers got different sizes type of brushes. So,
sorry, what surface are you using? What paper?
What this is a board. I primed the board with some brown color.
Oh, okay.
The reason I've done it with a brown color is because I want to see a lot of light. So if there will be a little bit of browns left, it might be actually quite nice if I'll leave tiny little gaps. I'll show you the effect I'm trying to get to have. I quite like painting a variety of backgrounds. For example, sometimes it might be browny violet, sometimes it could be orange, quite bold and strong orange. Doesn't mean that the painting is going to end up orange. Very often orange background or yellow background could be really good for painting something summery. Yeah, if you're doing a summery landscape with a lot of green, that might be a really good option. Right, I'm going to mix now some sky color. So I'm going to go for phthalo blue with tiny bit of water. I'm going to get some violet because I'm going to start from the top of the sky. If I'll just use the two colors without any white, my paint is going to be quite transparent. I'm going to see a lot of brown background. The whole, it doesn't matter what color background would have been, even white. It's the paints would have been too transparent, full stop. So white adds a little bit of body to it. So I'm just going to mix that one really well. I'm going to start from the top, nice and solid, fresh, strong color. The sky is always much darker, the darkest at the top. The closer we get to the horizon, the lighter it's going to be. Okay. And it's because if we look up, yeah, above our heads, that's the shortest distance to space. But when we look towards the horizon, that angle lengthens. So we've got more and more layers of air, dust, and it just becomes that blue, fresh kind of darkness, yeah, of the space becomes much more diluted with that air and dust. That's why it looks paler. That's the physics of it. Right, so I'm just adding a little bit more white to my color. I'm just going to check if that is going to be a good where that blue might be. I think it might be somewhere here. So all I'm going to do now is roughly paint behind my clouds. So anything above will have a little bit darker blue. Okay. So I'm going to use nice big wacky strokes to create a bit more movement. Keep mixing my colors so they change in gently. So I'm not painting the sky like a fence, nice and even, okay? Although on a photograph it appears very even, quite often we'll have some movement, you know, the wind, there might be some very soft clouds, you know, very light, so that we still see the dynamics of variety of, it's almost like painting the air, just showing just a little bit of that texture. So I quite like introducing tiny bit of violet here and there, just to see that change, that depth there. Okay. I'll also paint slightly further into the cloud shape. I know there will be quite a lot of white here, but I want some of the gaps maybe appearing between the clouds parts, so we could have some transparency. Yeah, so the cloud will start looking more realistic. Also, going up towards the top of the painting, I made in more darker blue and some violet, but going close to the horizon, I made in a bit more white, and I'm also going to add a little bit of emerald green. So we're going to more turquoisey colors. So that's the change I'm going to do. That's usually a very, very effective approach to sky painting, especially if you are painting a sunny day. Okay, so that's my, okay, it looks very white. Let me just double check. It's actually my screen, not my paint. So if I'll just mix tiny bit more darker color, and let's see how that's, well, that's better, because my clouds will stay lighter than color. So that's better. And that's close to the horizon, might be even lighter. Okay, I'm still using a big brush, although I'm trying to paint some small gaps in between. If I'll paint some of the clouds at this stage, it doesn't matter, because I know roughly where they're going to be. I can find them very easily. But I do like to use a bigger brush at this stage. So I'm not faffing about with too many details. I'm not getting lost with an amount of details. I'm seeing everything as a whole quite quickly. Okay, so I'm increasing a bit more darkness of the blue here, so I can come back to this area. So I'm trying not to just to finish one area and just move on, just slowly down. I'm trying to find what's the darkest, what the lightest, what the medium ones, and then start working around somewhere in between. So I'm constantly comparing those colors. As I said, painting like a fence type of strokes also might not be the most interesting way for me to paint. And I know sometimes if you want to show stillness, that's when you need to have that perfect, even surface. But this is not the case at the moment. So phthalo blue is one of my favorite blue colors in acrylics. Is that a cloud? Actually, I might just get rid of that one. If I'll do a cloud, I'll paint it over. Yeah, the phthalo blue is a classic type of color, which makes just the comparison between the sky. That's if ultramarine is a bit more blue violet color, phthalo blue is a classic sky color. In watercolors, it's often called azure or brilliant blue, but the titles vary in various paints and various manufacturers. Okay, let's have a look. I think I'm losing some of my smaller clouds, but it doesn't matter because it might be even easier for me to paint them over. Right, so I'm just moving tiny bit away from my board just to see how it develops here. Okay, that's looking good. For the clouds themselves, so before I start working into my foreground here, I'm going to block some of my clouds as big shapes. I got much there now, it's all here. So if my sky got loads of cool colors, I need to paint my clouds in a slightly warmer colors without making them orange or red. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to mix some ochre. Let me just wash my brush. So I'm still using my big brush. I'm going to mix some ochre with some violet. I haven't quite washed my brush perfectly, so if there is a little bit of blue left, that's absolutely fine as well. So I'm looking for some sort of gray color made from violet and ochre, but at the same time, not too yellow, not too violet. So I need to have something in between. So if I use tiny bit of blue, it will just cool it off gently. I think that's maybe too much. So let me just find that warmth present within the cloud. Okay. Now, part of this big cloud still have quite a dark shadow. So if I'll paint it too light, it might be too strong in comparison to the rest of the white clouds. So this is going to be my big shadow. So I'm even holding the brush, not just gently, accurately, yeah? I'm just using the side of it here. So all of that area is going to be in the dark. I can do some nuances of it later. So I'm painting quite quickly just to have that impression of the cloud and the impression of that shadow there. Okay, so we have some light there, but I will come back with it afterwards. If I'll do some dry brushing over part of my sky, that will give an effect of, there are some fluffier ends to the cloud. Okay, something there. I think I'm going to just take it a little bit more here. Okay, and I can always shrink it if needed. If I don't like something, I can always use a paper towel, dip it in some water, maybe just gently lift it off. Okay, my sky color is well lifting off with the cloud because my sky hasn't quite dried there yet, but that's okay. Right, so that big shadow is roughly done. I'll work it into it's gently reflecting here. Okay, that might be a little bit better for you to see. So that darkest section is done. I'm going just to place some other shadows on some of the clouds. So as I was doing some of these lines, so I might lose some of them for a very short period of time while I'm doing some larger chunks, and then I'll use some lighter colors and our clouds will start springing back. Okay, so that will stay somewhere here as well. So don't want those two being two similar lines, so maybe extend one. Okay, that might be another darker shape. Again, I'm trying to keep, for this stage, I'm trying to keep my strokes reasonably flat. So don't build up too thick texture. For example, if I painted a cloud and I didn't quite like it later on, because it's my first layers, I can very happily work over it. But if it would have been too thick layer, it might be harder for me to fix it because the relief, the relief of the previous paint is too strong. Okay, well, I've got this color. I think if I'll increase a little bit of ochre and some white, I can put a little bit of texture on part of this road. So I've got a connection of some of the light here as well. And there is a stone wall with some of the stones lit up on the sunshine. And I think some highlights, again, just a quick thinking here, quick possible adjustments or possible ideas of extra light coming in. Right, my big brush could be now washed and put aside. And I need to move to a slightly smaller brush. I always tend to start with a bigger brush. Doesn't matter how small my painting is. And recently I've been working on a very, very large scale, about 2 meters by 1 meter canvases. And if I don't have big enough brush, I would use a very large sponge. So then the surface of it is quite big still. So now I'm going to use a smaller synthetic brush. That's about the width of my finger here. And let's work for some highlights of the clouds. Actually, I want to start still with the highlights of my big cloud, so I might need to still come back to my big brush before I'll go and change it. So I'm going to use some white and some ochre, but it's not going to be fresh. All I'm doing, excuse me, all I'm doing, I'm just adding a bit of color on my palette because I don't want fresh white yet. I want to build up some of those tones. So again, let's do some soft strokes on my cloud. Maybe where some of the light might be. Some of this paint is still a bit wet because I made it quite runny when I applied it. Okay, that might be a nice soft edge. And there's a bit of light coming somewhere right at the back there. Okay, these marks are a little bit similar, so I'll just use my tissue. And then I'm trying to keep some of the edges. Can you see how that's soft? And then you've got very sharp edges as well. So I'm going to try to do the same with some of these ones. So I'm going to have some sharp edges, some soft edges, disappearing one and reappearing one. Okay, those two are now a bit similar. So maybe I'll have a slightly different mark there and then make them soften a little more. Okay, so I've got a bit of volume happening there, yeah? Something in the front. And this edge is a little bit sharp as well. So I'll just play with the tissue paper here and just soften part of it. So it's looking much more natural. Now, this part of the cloud, if I just lean it over a tiny bit more, just reflecting here, but it's all quite dark. So I want to differentiate it a little bit. I don't want to be as strong as light as that, but if I'll go using a flat side of the brush, I can build up a gentle light. Yeah, I'm just scribbling it a little here. So I've got some texture happening and it's not so evenly dark. I think I could also do with something pale, maybe on this end. Maybe a tiny bit too much, so that's just nice. Tiny bit back. It's also watching the acrylic surface to dry, or if it's dry, it will be certain things I can do with it, and I could, you know, put a stroke. If I don't like it, I can wipe it off. But also, if the surface is a little bit still damp, it means that I can smudge into some of the strokes and work with them a bit more boldly. Now, because some of that is still quite a wet surface, I'm going to let it dry and decide if anything else needs to be done or if it's going to stay as it is. Because sometimes when it dries, it could end up tiny bit darker than what it is at the moment. Sorry, it was just a bit of a paint on the side of that cloud. I think it was almost curling away, so I'm just going to touch it up with a better color. Otherwise, I'm ending up with a paler color. So that's a little touch up. And not to have a perfect shape for it, what I'm going to do, I'm going to soften my paint and just smudge it. That's better. That's lovely. I really like that one. That corner looks a bit too cold, too dark as well. Okay, right, good. So now I can wash my brush and move into my smaller size brush. Okay, so that's done. Oops, so I'm gonna go for the same color. So a bit of ochre, white, and whatever is else left on my palette. So a hint of blue, a hint of extra violet. And again, I'm going to go a little bit more with a runnier paint, just to have a bit more spontaneous strokes, so it's not too solid. And again, I'm holding the brush. That looks very light, actually. Maybe I'll just put a tiny bit more darkness to it. even for the highlights. I can always put my highlights afterwards. So I want a little bit more gradual build up of the darkness. So I'm using the brush. I'm almost got a finger over it. So I'm not painting it just quite evenly like that. I find it's harder, especially if I need to do some much more natural forms, let's say clouds. Yeah, like that. The brushes just does the job for me. I don't do much, don't put much effort. Everything else is just done for me. Okay, so that's a good one. Let's find some fluffy ends for these clouds. Okay, maybe an edge somewhere here. Maybe it's a little bit strong. So I'll just touch it up with some water and just make it present there. We'll see how that one dries. Actually, it's completely disappeared now. Okay, that's better. And there is another top of the cloud here. So I'm going sideways of the brush. Yeah, with a little gap from another cloud. So those two are developing together. Maybe something close to the horizon. Okay. A nice build up. Okay, there. And let's have a look at this one. This is quite a large one as well, but it's close to the horizon. So overall, it might not be as big, only because of its positioning. So I'm going for those grays. Okay, there will be some smaller clouds in between. And I'll slowly start adding some paler, some stronger, lighter colors. Okay, if I were to follow the exact photograph, or if I would have been painting outside, everything's going to be moving very quickly. So I try not to copy the photograph too identical, because very often my own layout will be, yeah, I can remove the cloud, I can add the cloud, I can introduce a tree or reduce its size, move it about. I think that's an extra freedom really for you as an artist when we do that. Okay, that's a good one as well there. Tiny bit lower. Okay, and let's give the middle ground clouds a little bit more precise feel. So let's have a tiny bit more white and still a bit of ochre on my brush. But overall, this is going to be less watery type of paint. It's going to be much stronger. Okay, that looks very strong already. So again, maybe I just need to step back with the darkness and just make it a tiny bit more gentler first. Okay. So I want to preserve some of my previous layers there. Okay. Maybe another one somewhere at the back. Any other colors? Any other whiteness? Yeah, how it might start gently coming through. So I don't want to paint the whole cloud the same dark, kind of the same light on it too quickly. I want to have that volume showing, but just playing with the light a little bit here, a little bit more there. Maybe there is a gap. Yeah, maybe that's how the sun just come out, and that's where we can see that light gently through. Okay, maybe that will be a bit more dark or lighter, bolder in color. Okay, let's build up this structure slightly more. Okay, so it's fluffing up. Now it's nice, big, bold shape, but for it to stand out and have more impact, I need to have a slightly darker, cooler shadow. Let me see if I can mix that color just to support it a little bit more here. So it's not just a big white area. Okay, that's good. So I'll start. So from a big cloud like this one, quite wacky, sometimes it takes way quicker to paint it rather than the small details, which needs a bit more attention, definition. Okay, let's get a tiny bit more darker tone for the shadow of the cloud here. Maybe part of it's going to be part of the sky as well. So some of the shadows will start paying a bit more attention. Okay, so that gives us extra depth. Okay, that's good. Again, I'm using for the shadows a little bit of violet and blue and some ochre. And I'm using a bit more diagonal, flat type of strokes just to identify some of those bottom parts of the clouds. Okay, so there's some there, but we don't have to count them all. Maybe part of that is going to be there, maybe just will disappear. Maybe in other sections we only just see the bottom parts. Okay, that's dry. I think I might just try putting a bit of, okay, my brush holds some extra white somewhere in the base of it, so that's not the color I want to have. No, that looks very bluey. And it's all reflecting, so I can't quite see it well anyway. So I don't like that one. That's okay. This means I can just wipe it off. I can just wipe it off. Tiny bit more, touch up what previous layer washed off. I think it might have been quite a thin layer for it to be washed off. And the rest, when it dries, it will just remain as it was before. Just smudge all that one a bit more evenly. That's it. Okay, I'm gonna leave the clouds a tiny bit of a break. Actually, tiny bit more. Some highlights for some smaller clouds. Let's just do that a little bit more gentler. So, and I also have small amount of pinky type of color by using a bit of violet and some ochre. I ended up with a nice pale color of the pink, which is kind of pinky gray. And it might be a good one here to work with later on as well. Just build up some of those paler colors. Okay, trying to keep the brush creating some ridges, kind of fluffiness, at the same time not to overdo it. When I'm coming close to the horizon, I need to keep some of the areas quite low, quite flat. And while these colors will be drying, I can work on the foreground. Now we're roughly halfway through our sessions. Anybody need a drink or a quick break? Are you all okay? Okay, if you're all good, I'll keep on painting then. If you come up with any questions, please go ahead and ask. Okay, so that's one is okay there. Okay. Just a tiny bit of finger painting, just to soften. Just felt like that pink could have been there, so that's good. Right, let's have a look at the ground here. So for the for the road, I'm going to have some a little bit of warmth by using mainly violet and ochre together with a bit of white. So somehow I've got a bit of blue here, so I'm just going to get rid of it here and mix a fresher color. Okay, that looks quite great. So it means that I need to get more violet, a bit more stronger. So that's a nice color, but I think that looks too dark. Okay, let's just mix it with my existing color here and see how that will spread. So I'm going to make it flat first. So I'm putting a flat similar color for most of the road. And what I'll do next, I'm going to start painting some shadows on it. So I'm adding a hint of blue to this violet brown type of color, because I can paint then a shadow right at the back. Maybe it's a shadow from a cloud. Maybe it's a shadow, more likely from a cloud, because there isn't any big trees or anything else to cast a shadow. Might be unevenness in the road. Yeah, something there. Maybe some of that light been spreading somehow unevenly. Sometimes how the road's been surfaced creates its own. Okay, I can do a bit of a sharper shadow here. When the road's been surfaced, sometimes it's been patched up from different segments of asphalt. Sometimes it's been done in different years, so the patches, and it just reflects in the sun and just makes it a bit more exciting for us to paint as well. So I'm just going to play with some of these shapes, and let's frame this road with a little bit of background of the grasses of the fields. So my road's spread out a bit too much, but it doesn't matter because it's acrylic paints. I can paint over it very easily. So I'm using some ochre and emerald green, and I'm going to block again some, okay, maybe a little bit more ochre to make it more happy, sunny type of green color. Okay, so I'm going to block it just first of all. Okay, that gives me an idea where that green might be. And I'm going to use a similar green on the other side. Let's put a tiny bit of highlights first here. So I'm adding more white to ochre and emerald green here. Maybe there will be something, patches of it. So I'm doing quite an impressionistic feel for it. And on the other side, might have it a little bit narrower here. Okay, and then a bit more stronger green. I'm going to mix that green with some blue, with my fellow blue. Okay, the paint mixes quite smoothly and I want it a bit more blocky. So let's keep it slightly darker here next to the wall. Okay, let's get some of that shadow build up here as well. Maybe a tiny bit more darker tone. Okay, I think this section acrylics are quite thick here, so I might wait for it to dry gently. It almost behaves as if it's an oil painting now. Quite thick paint, smudges. Okay, there will be some more green behind, but for that I need to get some fresher green. I want to make it from using cadmium yellow and emerald green. So I'm going to put a drop of cadmium yellow. That will give me a fresh, sunny type of green. So I'm using some white, cadmium yellow, and some emerald green. So that looks almost fluorescent type of color. So I'm going to make sure it's not going to be too fluorescent on my painting. But what I'll do, I'll test it out. Okay, I want to put tiny bit of it somewhere here. Okay, that looks almost white. Okay, so it means that I need to have more green, more yellow, not as much white. Okay, just gonna take some extra paint off on the tissue. Okay, and let's just maybe try it a bit more here. Oh, that would be quite a nice one. And against the brown background, which we can still see little gaps of, that gives me a nice green effect. So something close to the road might be a little bit more mucky, or a little bit more, there might be some more soil, but in this area I will touch it up as well with some fresher green. Does it mean that my green is going to be light? I can make it a bit darker, but it will be looking fresher. Okay, some more of that green is going to come here. And on this side, it looks like the field behind here is in the shadow, so it doesn't have as much light. But it is definitely a very different green from the foreground next to the road. So I'm going to try to keep it reasonably flat without building up too much light and darkness or an extra color, because I want to have it not as significant in comparison to my clouds when I'll especially touch up the details. So I need to have the background of the fields tiny bit more simplified. Okay, if there is a highlight there, then it's coming more or less together. It's also giving me an idea how much space is left for the sky. And I think I'm going to put a little bit of green touch up somewhere here. Again, I want to keep it quite fresh, quite loose at the front, because most important part in the painting is that movement of the road and the sky and those clouds. So if I'll take all the attention away from the foreground, from them to the foreground, I might be losing my focus then, my kind of initial intention. But what the road is doing now, and these strokes from them, from the grasses, they're taking us into the composition. We're entering it here, we're following the clouds, and hopefully we're going to be staying here. So then it means that I'll need to do some more work here to have a bit more of a focal point, and that's where part of my fence is going to be as well. And it's also, I need to make sure that I'll follow that route maybe somehow here with highlights of the clouds, just to have that swirl developing more. Okay, I think that's enough for the grass for now. Let's do the wall. Let's do a shadow of the wall. I still got a bit of brown left. Actually, I've forgotten, I've got a tree here as well. Well, the tree is going to be quite a dark silhouette of bluey green. So it's going to be probably of quite a similar in darkness as my wall, but slightly different color. So it's my darker green, which I mixed by putting together some blue, tiny bit of whatever green I had on my palette, and some violet. Okay, there might be some more trees in there. Okay, so they will be staying as a group. That's quite nice. Actually, there isn't any trees on the picture here, but I think I would like a tree there. That will be showing extra perspective there. And if I change my mind, I can always paint it over with my clouds. I think I'll put a one standing tree here as well. And that's quite nice. I'll give it a tiny bit of a highlight on one side. That will be a good one as well. Okay, I'm happy with that. Maybe just shrink it on this side a tiny bit. So it has slightly different shape to the trees on the left-hand side. We don't want them to be all the same. I'll just mix this paint, otherwise it's getting a bit patchy. Okay, little shadow under the tree, or at least just a smudge, just to show there's some sort of darkness in that section of the field. That's good. Okay, that's better. And let's do the wall. So I'm going to make the wall using the violet and phthalo blue. So I haven't had a huge range of colors. I usually get away with using about 7 colors plus black and white. And black I use to make indigos or to make more sophisticated purple. So I don't use black on its own. So it doesn't have to have a lot of color. Okay, that's a good one, but I think I need more violet in this. And let's find the exciting edge. So I haven't got any black here at all. Don't think I'll need it tonight. I want to keep my colors strong. I can also preserve some of that pale brown color. Okay, let's just move the wall a bit more across here. Okay. Maybe there will be a gap. I think there should be a gap further back, but I think here it works better. You can see it better here as well. This might be some extra details from the fencing. Okay, so it works as a silhouette. On this part of the wall is mainly on a sunlit area, so all I'll do here is just to reinforce some of the shadows, maybe just show parts of them, stones, just a little texture of them, and then again maybe put a couple of parts of the fence. Okay, there. Any other shadows here close to the road, on the road edge, sometimes just sharpens up the movement. I'm trying not to make all the even strokes. I'm trying to vary the strokes as much as I can. Okay, so that's quite nice. Quite like that background left and a bit of highlight. It might be just a different type of crops. It might be something else. It's just working really well. So I'll keep that one there. Okay, that tree is there as well. Just to make the trees at the back a little bit more three-dimensional, I might just add a tiny bit of hint of shadow for some of them there as well. Maybe just sometimes a little mark is enough to reinforce that depth. Okay, that's all good. And let's come back to some playful strokes for the clouds. I'll just double check what's this curve on the road. I might just, okay, just bring it a tiny bit more diagonally so that shadow looks, okay, that's quite nice. That's good. Smudgy. Okay, that's fine. Bit of a sharper edge there at the back. That looks like some sort of house even, maybe. I don't know, we'll have a look. Right, so I need to wash my brush now and come back to some lighter colors for the clouds. So at this stage, I might keep painting and repainting the areas just to, again, to make sure that I have got the right focus, not just because the cloud is pretty there, but because I want to work into that composition. Remember, I was talking about that swirl feel. So I need some fresh paper towels here as well. Okay, so let's have extra light color. So again, I'm going to come back to some of those grays, but I'm going to slowly reduce the darkness. I can't go with the very pale colors immediately. If some of these ones look very pale, they're way off from a fresh white. Well, you can see probably that will be more of a fresh white here on my board. Right, so let's have a look where some of those highlights might be somewhere here. So let's just do it as little dots, as little chunks, and I'll use the kitchen towel just to give them a bit more of a soft edges for some of them. So then the painting doesn't look too different. I don't want to have very sharp edges and then a lot of very smudgy ones, so that the style of the painting need to belong to each other as well. Okay. So one cloud maybe behind another. Okay, that's a nice smudge there. Just a little touch up. I think if I'll go for a tiny bit darker. And build it up not too quickly. Although it's very tempting to go full strength. Well, I'm coming close to the end of the painting and I need to be a little bit more precise. So big wacky strokes are always the most exciting and easy ones. They kind of throw us from being too even and too precise in the beginning of the painting, and then we calm that movement down and get the nuances sorted with a bit more extra time. Okay, that's slowly started coming in a bit more now. Let's see how that will come up, and let's see how it will dry before I touch anything else there. Okay. Maybe even painting something very pale close to the horizon, because we're going up the hill on that road, and that will give me an extra silhouette for the tree. And it's almost as if there is a cloud going right behind all of that space. That's got nice. That's a lovely lit up area now. Okay, good. Now I think I'll probably do something similar somewhere here as well. Just reintroduce it a little bit bolder. So that way, so it means that maybe this cloud could be even bigger. Okay. Let's give it a little bit more of a fluffy end. Yes, that's a good one, brave one. Okay, I'm quite happy with this area now. Let's have a look if there's anything else need to be done. Here, I don't want it to be too strong. So I'll start with some smaller marks and just have a feel for it. Maybe somewhere here. So I'm trying to not to make a precise mark. I'm trying to have that playfulness of the stroke. So when you look at it, you'll have a question if you haven't seen me doing it. How it's been done? What's it been done with? Yeah. Has it been washed with a sponge? Has it been done with brush? What scale brush was it? Was it diluted? Was it not? Okay, that's quite nice as well. Okay, start having a couple of eyes here. So let's just maybe get rid of one of them. Okay. Maybe just soften the edge of part of this one. A tiny bit of water on my kitchen towel. Having that control. Which we can have with acrylic paints in comparison to watercolors. I think that could be a big one actually. Oh yes. So at this stage, I stopped looking at the photograph I've been working from. I'm mainly looking at the painting and having a feel for it. Is there too many similar shapes, or do they actually have the rhythm, or the clouds having the rhythm, or they're just a bit more random? And to be honest, I think I'm quite happy with all of this. I think I might just touch up part of the wall, maybe a tiny bit more highlights on the road. I was considering putting a lighter stroke on the cloud here, but I think it's dried beautifully, so I don't really want to touch it anymore. Anything else here at all? Let's just see if I'll put a paler line, and if it doesn't look right, I can wipe it off. That's how we know if when to stop. Yeah, it's a classic question. Have I done too much? Do I need to stop? Have I overworked it? So if I add something and it doesn't look right, and I remove it and it doesn't make any difference, so yeah, it's okay. If I removed it and something is missing, then maybe something else needs to be worked in. I think maybe in this case, maybe something tiny bit pale, maybe not as light as I've done it. Maybe something pale in this area. Okay. I like that. Right, tiny bit of highlights on the wall. So I'll use again some ochre and some white. Tiny bit of violet. Just to have some of that almost like purpley redness to the picture. And I'll just skim the surface, maybe just a tiny little touch of the light coming through. Okay, on touching it up on the top of the stones. There. Bit more there, maybe on tops of some of the poles. Just don't want them to look like mushrooms, that's okay. Again, maybe just to show the depths here, gently, without showing too much. And tiny bit more on the road. I think I'm going to reinforce one of the shadows here. Sorry, yeah, by painting a bit more of a gap here. A little bit stronger gap. And maybe a stronger highlight here as well. Now the road has dried. Got a nice feel for it as well. And then I'll finish it off by putting my little signature, which is usually done in Russian letters. So what I do, I put a letter B for Borodina, which is looking like this. It's almost like a printing type of letter. Now I tend to use the colors I used already on my painting. So that is going to be my B for Borodina. Because it's a bigger letter, I'm going to put Julia in the middle of it. So, and then Julia, if I divide this one into half and put a little stroke there, so it's almost, if you know the Russian alphabet, but you might not, I don't expect you to know, will be a letter within a letter there. Ta-da! And I think my painting is finished. So at this stage, I'll leave the painting for a day or so. I'll put it out of my sight, or maybe put it opposite, quite close to me, so keep bumping into it, and from time to time look at it, and then decide if anything else needs to be done or if I need to leave it as it is. So I'm going to stop the recording, and then you can ask me questions if you've got some.